Light Pollution News, March 2025, Gateway Topics. This episode, headlights, interior lights, what is going on with car lights, and should we leave the lights on for puffins? Plus, how much do you spend to get a good night's sleep? This month on the show, I welcome Los Angeles dark sky advocate Spencer Soohoo, the founder of the Dark Skies subreddit, Jeff Shmalz, and law enforcement veteran and educator Art Hushen. A new episode of Light Pollution News begins right now. Glad you at home could join me for another Light Pollution News. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney. Each month, we gather the news and bring on three great guests to talk about the goings-on. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We do the show twice a month and cover a variety of topics as light pollution casts a rather wide glow on our society. You can find out more about Light Pollution News by heading over to our website at lightpollutionnews.com. Over there, you'll find the script and transcript for today's show. You'll also find all of the links that we talk about today, not to mention a variety of useful tips and a whole page dedicated to ecology news. While there, you can join our mailing list or become a supporter of the show. Paid supporters receive personal invites to each show as an audience member, which often has a Q&A with a guest at the very end of the show. We also provide a full slate of news pull to our paid supporters. That's the full month of news pull that we get. We give that right to our paid supporters. Interested in becoming a supporter? Starting cost is only $3 a month. That's literally less than the price of one cup of coffee you would get in the course of your month. All proceeds go towards us continuing to grow our footprint by covering costs, including production, server, and marketing. Learn more by either clicking support the show link in today's show notes or by heading over to our website, lightpollutionnews.com/support. Of course, before we begin today, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and you'll be able to receive this show delivered into your podcast feed each and every release. And be sure to find us over on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. We have a small but growing community over on Facebook, so we'd love to hear from you. Lastly, if you ever thought about today's show that you'd like to have read on the air, you have two options. You can text it over by way of a free text link in the show notes, or you can email me, bill@lightpollutionnews.com. Let's get back to it this month. I want to thank my guests for coming on. We have, I think, a really fun slate of guests here. First up, many of you may know his Reddit. Even if you don't know the man behind the channel, I learned of this Reddit through a friend of the show, Diane Turnshak, who told me and implored me to definitely check out the Dark Sky Reddit. And the man behind the curtain, Mr. Jeff Shmalz. I'm saying that right, Jeff, right?
Yeah, you are. Close enough for
Well, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you mentioned a stat. What was it? How many subscribers you have on that Reddit now?
We're over 32,000 members.
Okay, over 32,000 members. That is kind of a bonkers amount. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this Reddit, how it started? How did this come about?
I think I'll start off by saying, for people who aren't familiar, what Reddit is. And Reddit is a social media site. And what makes Reddit unique is that it breaks down into what they call subreddits, which are topics of conversation for specific interests. So you can find anything from bicycling to water polo to anything you like. And I started with a passion for basketball. When I discovered I was a dark sky advocate and very passionate about the subject, when I went to Reddit, I searched for a dark sky subreddit. And to my surprise, there wasn't one. And as a dark sky advocate, we know that one of the most important things we can do is raise awareness about the subject. And so I sort of decided to take the mantle and start the Dark Sky subreddit myself. And it's sort of been a learning process since, and it's been growing and growing since then.
Jeff, when did you start that Reddit?
I think it's been about 10 years ago, maybe 11.
What was it like starting out 10 years ago? Was it just a trickle of people, or did it have a sharp...
It was absolutely empty. It was nothing. One of the things of being a moderator is that you have to sort of create your own content, especially if nobody else is posting anything. So there's just years of me finding these dark sky stories and just posting them, and most of them getting ones, and then eventually they started getting 3s and 5s for karma. That's how they sort of upvoted. And nowadays, we have subreddits that get, up to 3,000 upvotes and onwards. So it's really nice, exciting to see it grow.
Wow. 10 years ago, only one or two. I know your average is probably in the like right around 100, right? the upvotes and
Nowadays,
stuff?
Yes, it is.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, that is a lot. That's no small feat.
No, but it's always exciting when you find a subject that people are passionate about, and then it really gets excitement and the conversation gets going.
Well, excellent work. That's, man. Yeah, and if you at home haven't used Reddit, it's very niche, right?
Absolutely.
Hyper specific, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Jeff, very glad to have you here. So maybe you can help us through one of the articles coming up. Next up this month, someone who I tried to have back on December. I think we crossed our lines a few times, and hopefully everything is okay, and hopefully everything's all right for you out there in LA region. Mr. Spencer Soohoo, thank you for coming on. And you're a research scientist by day and an astronomy enthusiast by night. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got your passion into this space?
Well, I grew up in northern Arizona, and you could walk outside your front door and look up and you could see the Milky Way. And it was like, wow, that's great. Through the years, I've been in different places. I ended up in Southern California. And good luck seeing the Milky Way from downtown LA. I also volunteer for star parties at Griffith Observatory, and we pick the first quarter moon because, and people ask why, and we say, well, there's so much light pollution, you're not going to see much else besides the really bright stars and planets, and at least you can see the moon. So I got interested in dark sky because my astronomy club, the Los Angeles Astronomical Society, has a dark sky site about 90 miles outside of LA. And there you can walk out and you can see the Milky Way, no problem. Although light pollution from the developments in the nearby, about maybe 30 miles away, is getting worse and worse. And used to be we could stand next to each other and barely see each other's faces. Now there's no trouble recognizing faces because there's so much light pollution. So I got into dark sky advocacy when we learned that the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors had approved the development of 10,000 housing units about 10 or 15 miles away from our site. And we said, oh boy, that's really going to ruin things. And so another fellow and I, we co-chair the Los Angeles Astronomical Society Dark Sky Light Pollution Committee. And we started contacting the county supervisors' offices, things like that, trying to figure out what we could do about this to mitigate the problem. And it turned out that Los Angeles County had a dark sky ordinance that was passed in 2011. And so after working with various officials in various departments, we finally hooked up with the Department of Regional Planning. And it turned out that Los Angeles County had the dark sky ordinance, but it had not been enforced. And we said, okay, that's where we're going to start. So we figured we'd do a multi-phase approach. We would work on strengthening the legislation that's already in place, and then work on public awareness and education. And so that's basically how we got our start.
And you initially, and I caught your name when you guys sent out a pamphlet. You guys are putting pamphlets out.
So the aha moment, I think, was, we were getting nowhere with regional planning. And then just for the hell of it, I thought, I'm going to invite them to our dark sky site and they'll see what we're talking about. And it was one of those Hail Mary passes, right? And I was shocked when they accepted. I said, oh, shoot. So it turned out that we were very fortunate because the director's daughter was interested in astrophysics. And so this other fellow and I, Rod Kaufman, and I picked our what we call a family night where we can invite guests to our dark sky site. And so he brought out his 16-inch knob, and we had several other scopes out there. And so we showed them Jupiter, and you could see Jupiter. It was so bright that you could actually see the image projected onto your people's faces. And then I pointed out the Milky Way, and I pointed out the light dome from the Santa Clarita Valley and said, see, the Milky Way is being obscured by the light pollution. And the director looked at me and says, okay, I get it. And that to me was the aha moment, the turning point. And so they actually, after we met with them, we set up some periodic meetings, and they said, education is a big factor. We don't have the budget for proactive enforcement. We depend on people reporting problems, and we go after the offenders. So we're going to, at our expense, send out 10,000 mailers to northern Los Angeles County, and so telling people about the light pollution ordinance. And then about 6 or 8 months later, they made a second mailing to slightly different areas of LA County.
Spence, real quick, when LA County, for those at home who aren't aware, because LA County is a big county, And when
Yeah.
people think of LA, they think of the city, right? They think of the cities, think of the coastal communities.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell me about LA County and how this ordinance was supposed to be applied?
Okay, so the loophole is that it applies to the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County. If there's a city like Pasadena or Los Angeles, they have their own planning department. They set their own zoning requirements and such. But for the unincorporated areas, which means those areas which do not have their own city per se, they don't have a charter or whatever, or a mayor or council, they depend on LA County to provide the broad governance structure, so to speak. So Los Angeles County will establish codes for residential building and commercial building, things like that. What the county did, what the Board of Supervisors did in 2011 was that they approved what they call the Rural Outdoor Lighting District. So that applies to all of the non-incorporated or unincorporated areas. Think of it as the non-urban areas of LA County. Although the non-urban areas can be quite big and quite, contribute a lot of light pollution. I think, for example, there's an area called the Antelope Valley, which is about 20 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. And that's a big sprawling area. There are two communities, Lancaster and Palmdale, but surrounding those areas, outside those city boundaries, it's a lot of development, a lot of houses, a lot of industrial parks and things like that. And so the light pollution ordinance applies to those, but they don't apply to the specific cities in the county. It covers a wide area, and it covers what's importantly, it covers includes what we call the wildlife urban interface. So where I live like in the foothills of Los Angeles, near where the Eaton Canyon fire started. In fact, we could see the flames as they approached JPL from my house before we were evacuated. But I live in sort of an urban wildlife interface. And so I think that's an area that we need to preserve as well. And so my city that I live in, La Cañada, is incorporated. So it has its own zoning or its own building codes and things like that. So technically the Rural Outdoor Ordinance will not apply to the city of La Cañada, but it applies to all the area outside the boundaries of the city. So one of our efforts is to contact the governing councils or city councils of these cities in the wildlife interface and try and get them to adopt the Rural Outdoor Lighting District or standards as well. How's
that been going? I feel like it depends on the size and I guess the industry in the community.
And size and industry. And to be honest with you, in my own city, I made a presentation to the city council. They had their own planning meetings. And I got okay, thanks. Great ideas. We'll get back to you. I pinged them again. Oh, yeah, we're busy with other things. And so it's been going on for a few years now. And so it's one of those things where it's just going to take a lot of persistence. No, actually, so that's one of the things that we're trying to do with the Board of Supervisors now is that we actually invited our supervisor for my district to visit us at Mount Wilson. And Mount Wilson is, I think everybody, I don't know if people are familiar with it, but that's the historic Mount Wilson where the historic 60-inch telescope is, where Hubble discovered our place in the universe and so on. And so it's not used for scientific research anymore because of light pollution. And so when we invited Catherine Barger up there to look through the 100-inch telescope, and she was really, really wowed by what she saw. And her deputies were with her. And then as we walked outside, you could see the light pollution just in the LA basin just below us. And she said, okay, we think we can help you guys.
Oh.
And so the net result of that was that we've been meeting with her deputies to strengthen and enhance the Rural Outdoor Lighting District ordinance. And of course, we got derailed by the wildfires for a while, but we're going to start that up again in about 3 or 4 weeks.
At least you're safe and out there. There's no other major problems. Hopefully,
not yet. Not until the next major wind event.
Yeah.
But we've had lots of rain, so we're okay for a while.
It's funny you mentioned Mount Wilson. I actually decided to start doing some observing of the ARP galaxies, and I'm reading through the ARP, his compendium. And he did a lot of research right there at Mount Wilson and down Palomar as well. But he started at Mount Wilson, which just real quick, did you guys do anything for the occultation? Were you out there at Mount Wilson for that or?
The Mars occultation?
Yes. I mean, it happened a while back, but we don't have too many things happening this year.
Yeah. No, we did not. It's closed for the season right now. The roads are pretty treacherous going up there this time of the year.
Got it. Okay, well, moving on to our last guest, and certainly not the least, Mr. Art Hushen. Now, Art, you have an interesting story, and you served the public for 30 years in the Tampa Police Department's Special Operations Division, helped create the nation's first crime prevention through environmental design program while in Tampa, and you continue to forge the path for environmental design crime reduction at the state level as an instructor to Florida's Attorney General's office. You founded National Institute of Crime Prevention, which is an educational platform, I believe.
It is.
Yep. You continue advocating the mission today through adjunct professorship over at the University of South Florida, which is probably a really fun gig.
It is fun. It's a lot of fun. So, yeah, enjoying the time there, too. It's criminology. So, again, staying involved with that. But taking a look at the environmental design component, which was so important in learning about it early on, is because I'm a dark sky advocate. Got introduced to dark skies in about 2001. So that's how long ago I've been informed with what they're doing. I serve in a couple of committees. So when I look at environmental design, that comes back to things you've been discussing: planning, zoning, code, all the things that are relevant when you get into urban design, what a city's going to look like. So when we saw the issue with lighting, which working with cities around the country, that's a big issue. I've heard the dark sky movement next to that, but working with so many groups that are out there, their concern is going to be crime. And a lot of times that's not really discussed because I understand the value of the night sky. But when we're working with, let's say, properties with 400, 500 units on it and calls for service are at nighttime based off the type of crime, I can't come in and tell them, well, we don't want to turn your lights on. We have to turn the lights on. So we codify that through zoning. We follow dark sky standards as best as we could. I've served on the Rolling Committee. So cut off fixtures, again, on the ground, foot candle, and we codify that. Instead of coming at it from an activist working with a group or supporting that, we come in it through zoning and code. And we find we get more impact from that because through design, we can use lighting as one of many strategies to address criminal activity during the hours of dark and still maintain the social component. So we stress that over and over and over again. We do lighting training for the state of Florida. I do lighting training on its own. I've spoken at IES and serve on committees there. But the emphasis is quality lighting, good design, keeping it on the ground. What does the community need? What does crime tell us? Calls for service, which is sometimes skewed. Because remember, actual call for service is a documented incident. And then when we start looking at the numbers that maybe only 60% of all crimes reported, we're missing a lot of it. So how do we capture that? And so we like to conduct neighborhood design charrettes, getting their input on what the lighting should look like, what the street design should look like. So we take this whole different approach to supporting dark skies, focusing on good design and limiting opportunities for crime. A lot of value. American Institute of Architects, working with them, American Planning Association. So I think we have a good foundation. And what I like working with dark skies is that I kind of have an idea what they're looking for. And so I know what the public is looking for. So let's bring them both together and see what works best for all of us and still provide that feeling of comfort and safety when they're out walking their pet at night or meeting their neighbors in the park at night.
The compromise, the ultimate compromise, right?
The ultimate compromise, code and zoning, and bring it all together and make it work.
Sure. Yeah. So I was mentioning, or I'd like to pick his brains later because we're approaching a pivotal point. Because our first goal is to get the resolution passed by the Board of Supervisors to direct regional planning to revisit the ordinance that exists, and then that's the perfect point to update some of the standards that are in the ordinance, like no mention of color temperature in the ordinance. So we want to make sure that's in there. They do have things about lights being shielded and things like that, but we think that they could do more because what we're finding is that people say, LED lights, we save lots of energy. That means we can leave the LED lights on longer, right?
Yeah.
And so I can get a light that's 3 times brighter with a quarter of the power that I normally use, and so. We're seeing that effect, and so we'd like.
Hey, but it's LED. We got LED. That's
saves the environment.
Yeah, saves the environment. Yeah. So once the resolution gets passed and the director of regional planning gets involved in revising the ordinance, I think we're going to have some discussions about some of the nitty gritty details about what's involved in changes in the ordinance, and that's where I'd really like to pick your brains and.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Whatever I can do or trade information with you. That's because I always learn too. So I see what you're doing and how we apply to other parts of the country.
Right.
Well, this is a good segue into our warm-up article this month. I always like to have these in here. They just kind of set the pace for the show a little bit. So last episode, a great discussion with Nick Messler, the streetlight engineer, who really does some phenomenal work around the country. The North Yorkshire Council, over by the North York Moors National Park in the UK, will be replacing 4,500 streetlights with what they call a warm white LED fixture. The fixtures are slated to be turned off when not needed in order to protect both the environment, think ecology, and with the added benefit of protecting the view of the night sky. Since we're talking about, and Spence, I think you have an idea of what good street lighting is, and Art, you have an idea of what good street lighting is. Have you guys seen any good examples of street lighting projects that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so Los Angeles County Public Works took it on their own to actually start replacing all the lights in the unincorporated areas with 2,700 degree Kelvin lights. And so I think they've replaced I'd have to check, but I think it's upwards of 16,000 outdoor lighting fixtures already. And then they've got Southern California Edison, who has a contract for maintaining some of the street lights to replace theirs. And so that's a great feel-good story. And you can really tell the difference, because when you go from LA County to LA City, where the street lights are not as warm, you can definitely tell the difference.
And this was something that they did on their own? They weren't?
Yeah, they did on their own.
That's a rare story.
Yeah, well, and so then we have some members who live in Kern County, which is the adjacent county, and that's adjacent to our dark sky site. And so we tried contacting Kern County, and we got okay, but it's really the utilities company's role to replace the lights, and the utility company says, well, we'll do them if the county asks us, and the county says, well, we can't ask them because that means we might have to pay for them, even though the utility had agreed to do that without cost. So we basically hit a stone wall there, but that's the other side of the feel-good story, so to speak.
If I can jump in on that too, what Spencer mentioned, and Jeff, your opinion too, when I see these retrofits or when they replace the lights, this based off of old strategies as far as where to replace the fixtures themselves or the fixtures. And a lot of times they weren't using some of the standards for that. We look at uniformity and placement. And then we're not addressing tree canopy either, because over time that tree canopies continue to grow. So we're replacing all those with new fixtures, but we still have the dark spots again, which might be an indication of areas of concealment and hiding. Under new construction, I see it done very, very well when we're working with lighting professionals. For example, Nick and Ari, they're on the U.S. CPTED Association. So again, they're very active with us too. And I love the idea of the replacement. It's a start. It's always a start. But then tree canopy, sidewalks, seasonal, things that tie into that. That's a big concern for us when we look at that. It is, and you're great. It's a step. I love the idea that they're making the changes, but that distribution, again, how do I get that light out uniformly based off maybe some of the old city codes that were there on light placement? I've seen some per block. It says one light per block. So we're replacing that one with a new standard, but I only have one light, so we don't have that infill to support that level of illumination along the entire corridor, and that becomes a concern.
Jeff, do you have any good examples? You've seen anything good out there in the wild? Just driving
No,
around?
unfortunately, I don't. I see a lot more of the other side of it. The purple lights everywhere.
Oh man,
yeah,
right. Yeah, you and me both.
I see a lot of.
Well, I grew up in the town I grew up in northern Arizona, Winslow. The city manager was an amateur astronomer, astrophotographer. He helped start an astronomy club there, and actually he was instrumental in getting the city to put in night sky friendly street lighting. And so that was great. Now, fast forward 5 years, and he's left. And now people are complaining that there's not enough lights at night, so they want more lights and brighter lights. And so that's an example of, I think, where it shows how one person can make a difference either way. So the new city manager is kind of oblivious to the whole issue. And so I was there a few months ago, and I was just amazed at how much the light pollution had increased.
I feel like you need constant education, continuously, to always keep that conversation at the forefront. Otherwise, people will very forget and fall back into old patterns.
Agreed. It's got to be continuous education for a couple of generations so people get that ingrained in them.
Like I said, a couple of generations. I like that. Yeah. I mean, we're just getting a feel of it. Now, the future, those that come after us, hopefully they'll maintain that and keep it going.
Jeff, your site has been steadily going up over time. So hopefully it's indication of general momentum and reach.
Yes, and Reddit tend to appeal to younger audiences. So you get that optimism that younger people might be learning about this and continuing it on.
Well, I want to start us off this month with the ongoing saga similar to streetlights, but I've punted on this one for some time, mainly because I didn't think the news was really ripe enough yet for it. But here we are. And you can thank some excellent reporting by Nate Rogers at The Ringer. I recommend that all of you read this article, which of course can be found over on our show links. In 2025, there's no shortage of light pollution sources. And also in 2025, there's no shortage of passing the buck. I labeled this one under nuisance lighting, which has very real implications. Toward the end of 2024, news articles in the UK began to show signs that the United Kingdom was going to be the first English-speaking country to try and tackle the topic of headlight dazzling. For you at home, the phrase dazzle doesn't refer to some Hollywood or Bollywood superstar. Rather, it refers to the temporary blinding of a driver by the headlight glare that could precede any number of terrifying endings. Some things to note from Rogers' article, and since 2015 and the advent of LED headlights, the average headlight brightness has risen an astonishing 120%. And then the data that Rogers presents is a bit more curious, including one connection drawn from a New York Times article that correlates the rise in LEDs to increases in reckless driving and road fatalities. The article also discusses things from the point of view of a subredditor named Paul Gatto. Gatto, of course, started up this Reddit called F Your Headlights, edited above, since we are a family show, of course. The subreddit, as Rogers puts it, reads at times as if Grandpa Simpson is writing a letter to the president to say that there are too many states, and following up with a very RFK, by the way, I'm not a crackpot. Gatto and his Reddit represents a very activated and begrudging community who will bore the new blinding low beams as much as the stay in the high beams. So I'm sure that everyone here has a moment when they've been driving with these new LEDs that have blinded you or blinded a loved one. And of course, this is a very fixable problem. This topic, Jeff, I want to shoot this one over to you because this has been kind of a hot topic on your Reddit. Why do you think this specific topic has made it into the Dark Skies Reddit?
I think it's because it's easily accessible to everybody. Spencer was talking about how he had to convince people by driving them in, to see their dark sky sites and to see the new light pollution. But headlights are something we see every day, and we're always impacted by it. And it's popular on Reddit. Reddit's a niche, so people can find it very quickly. And when they're passionate, when you're blinded by something, guess what? There's a Reddit where you can vent that frustration, and there'll be people to cheer you on. And I think it's a great subreddit, and I'm happy that they're there. And yes, but I think the important part is that headlights, what I like to think of it as a gateway topic to the larger discussion of dark skies, because you really do feel it. It's easily accessible.
Gateway topic. That's an excellent way to put it. Oh, man. Yeah, it feels like Reddit is definitely the place to go to vent. We've all had these moments. Gatto even built a rear view mirror brightness reducer. You can actually buy this to assist you when someone pulls up behind you with absurdly bright LED bars from hell. I'll also mention that in an act of desperation, the author Rogers reached out to NPR's Click and Clack to the remaining surviving brother, Ray Magliozzi, who has this humorous quote regarding the aftermarket LED light bars. I don't know if any of you guys, if you at home have seen them, they are essentially rectangular, ultra bright bars that people, for some reason, decide to put on front of their vehicle. Per Magliozzi, speaking from Boston, Massachusetts, people attach these LED bars to their cars as if they're going to encounter a moose or something. Here we are on topic of automobiles. I don't know, has anyone here purchased a new car in the last year or two? Okay, yeah. So everyone here has purchased a new car. Have you guys noticed your interior setup is much brighter than it used to be as well?
The touchscreen also, just seeing that dash display, going from that, looking on the road. And then again, I don't like to drive at night anymore, to be honest with you. It's just kind of fearful between the headlights and the street lights and the background. I have a hard time seeing that. Just recently. So it's kind of like, okay, just stop driving. My wife says, stop driving at night. I'll drive for you, but I'm not that old yet. So, but anyway, so yeah, I do have problems with it.
So it's really frustrating. I mean, I go to our dark sky site. On our dark sky night, the rules are, only red lights, turn off your interior dome lights, carry red cellophane for people to put over their interior lights, things like that. It gets cold in the winter, right? So you go in your car to warm up. The screen lights up and it's bright, and it just floods the entire field, and you say, "Oh shoot!" Now people are going to curse me out because I've destroyed their night vision for the next 30 minutes.
I mean, Spence, it's the same when you go to a Star Party these days, because I'm thankful we picked up a new Subaru and I was able to tape over many of the areas.
Right.
But still, cars have all these weird lights on the outside. You don't know where they're all at, and you can get one. It feels like whack-a-mole sometimes trying to figure out where everything is.
Well, my car, the minute you approach, a light under the rearview mirror comes on to light your path. And I said, "Oh no."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a problem. It took me forever, and every time I try to do it, I have to try and error to find out where I can dim the damn panel. It's not easy to find how to dim it.
Even if you dim it, right? So in our Subaru, I like to have it pretty dark when I'm driving, enough just so I can see what's going on, just so I can see the speedometer, see, what the dash is looking like. I don't need that blazing at me. So we're able to dim it down, even including the giant infotainment screen. I don't know why we need to have TV screens in our car, but that's a totally separate topic. The giant infotainment screen comes back up to full brightness once you turn off the car. And it destroys your driving vision, and then you get out and you stumble because you can't see anything.
Well, at least in my car, I've got one light that always stays on. At least it's amber, so it's right under it shines down onto the pedals. So then that's always on at night, and there's no way to turn that one off. But it's amber, so it's not bad.
And I see it all, and I love it.
Yeah,
I love the new car, but again, it's just those little things like you talked about.
Yeah.
It's just trying to. Again, the glare, which is a big component. I kind of call glare our kryptonite. It makes us all weak and takes strength from us. So I see that constantly, and I'm like, okay, how do I adjust when I go out, pull in my driveway, get out, go up to the door? It's just kind of frustrating a lot of times.
I mentioned the interior part of the car, right? Because we had a Motor One article that actually took a jab at automakers this month, who bundled their dash, interior lighting, screen brightness controls all inside the infotainment screen, which is probably the worst place it could be when you're driving, trying to find a quick way to reduce brightness or to change something like your, defroster and fan speed and all that. Author Chris Perkins bemoans the eyesore of the infotainment screen. As I said, I really couldn't agree more. And the impact of LED strips in car interiors, for which the author casually implicates car manufacturer Mercedes, who I believe have a purple, or maybe it's an adjustable color light bar that goes across the whole interior right at the arm shoulder length. And then there's a lack of simple, tangible control switches anywhere in a car. And I think everyone can probably agree that maybe that can come back. A while back, I had Ben Chappelle from the Narrowband channel who came on, who mentioned that his wife's Honda had one switch where he could turn off all the lights. Pretty amazing. I don't know why that's not in cars these days. Jeff, how's your car?
It's, I was able to get dark enough where where it doesn't bother me. But this topic of conversation makes me think back to some articles I read last week about what happened with Jeep Company and Jeep cars. And that there were several people who were complaining that they were getting forced ads anytime they stopped the car.
Oh.
And so every time you stop the car, you get an ad for, I think it was, car insurance or something like that. And Jeep came out and said that was part of a contract that they had, that they would have to show those ads. And then Jeep's parent company, Stellantis, actually clarified that and said there was a bit of a glitch of the opt-out program. But I think what we really have to pay attention to is that these infotainment screens are actually going to be advertisement screens every time we stop the car. And with the audio industry's need for increasing profit, it's a certainty that we're going to see more of it.
Thanks for bringing back the good news, Jeff. Really appreciate that. Jeff, what kind of car do you have?
Oh, I have a Honda.
You have a Honda?
And I just did the switch from mid-sized cars to a SUV. So I think one of the things we talk about with headlights and everything is that you're up a little bit higher and it's a little bit better.
Now you're out there blinding people. Well, we blind people too. Our lights are hideous, and I think some people have definitely tried to blind us back because we can't turn it any lower. It doesn't get any lower. But in talking about the infotainment screen, we were just on a trip to Canada, and one of the things that happens in these new cars, so you're in cold weather, it's like 10 degrees every day, 15 degrees every day Fahrenheit, and the car starts up and tire pressure drops, right? So it has, a little thing that pops up. Well, in new modern cars, I guess, the thing pops up on the infotainment screen and says, hey, this is a problem. Your tire pressure is real low. Take it to a dealer. Not taking it to a dealer, but that seems to be the way we're headed. Before we get out of this space, you should know, if you pine for the days when cars had physical control buttons and cars were cars, I guess is probably the best way to put it. There's an impractical way to actually solve your car's infotainment screen's lack of control buttons. A YouTuber by the name of John Sutley found a way to control his car's digital readouts via an old school Game Boy. Yes, that Game Boy that interfaced directly into the car's onboard computer. Apparently it took Sutley a good bit of time to actually figure this one out. He even had to build custom circuit boards, but at the end of the day, he proved that it could be done. So, hey, maybe get some ads, maybe you can play some Tetris and Pokemon while you're driving. I feel like this is great. I feel like law enforcement community really would be appreciative of this.
They would love that. I would be nonstop for those guys.
Well, if it's a self-driving car.
Oh, true.
Combining all that together, Game Boy, self-driving car, Tesla, that would be amazing times.
Not for me, man. I'm 10 and 2. Staring at the road. That's all I want.
I hear you, Jeff. I'm with you. Changing topics here. We're going to stop yelling at the sky for a little bit. Some interesting stuff over in ecology this month, where the biggest story is from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, which took a victory lap on positive action that they inspired to reduce bird collisions at some critical areas. These include the famous McCormick Place Center in Chicago, for which you'll recall has a very lengthy history of bird slaughter, killing birds. McCormick Place installed nearly 2 football fields worth of bird dots on their windows, and the center also is implementing a curtains closed by default policy to cut down on artificial light escaping the building and luring birds in. Speaking of which, did you hear about the Viking Cruise? Viking Cruises actually installed a bird mode on their Octantis and Polaris ships. The mode would reduce the ship's light output by dimming the deck lighting automatically and closing curtains and informing passengers how light adversely impacts birds. This mode will be used when the ship passes through sensitive bird habitat zones. Oftentimes, the birds will be lured to track with the vessel due to its brightness. And let's not forget the Petrified National Forest, which has been a dark sky park for 7 years, is planning on replacing its current windows with etched bird safe glass. Which leads us to a nice little story on puffins, everyone's favorite bird. Puffins are a curious bird. Each year, puffins breed all across the North Atlantic. The lifelong monogamous birds return to the same burrow and lay only one egg. After a few months, the chick then leaves home to venture out onto the sea for the next 4 years of their lives before they breed. Well, according to a study out of animal behavior, artificial light of any color attracts puffins. You may recall an earlier article that we had on the show and Jeff had out in his Reddit, is that involved a number of conservationists in Iceland literally tossing puffin chicks into the sea. This helped avert the fledglings from being drawn astray by the nearby streetlights. We'll casually ignore the fact that, yet again, it's incumbent upon people to fix a completely man-made problem that is easily correctable with the right inexpensive shielding. Let's continue on here. Well, the study out of animal behavior built on the prior research and found that, yes, increased artificial light at night may increase fledglings' strandings, but it may also be a tool to lure the stranded fledglings away from dangerous situations and user conflicts. The study found that light color does not matter for puffins, rather simply the allure of the light itself. Yet another reason why street lighting should be shielded first when installed. At least that's my perspective on it. Spence, when you are looking to do the ordinance promotion and education, how much of that do you guys use ecological examples, ecological arguments for?
We use that in our pamphlet that we distributed. We use that as, one of the reasons why you should be concerned about light pollution. And we hit it along multiple fronts. And, following the Darksky International's lead, you hit it on the energy conservation front, human health front, environmental impact on wildlife. In fact, one of the people we worked with is a professor of biology at UCLA. He's also head of the local LA chapter of the Audubon Society, but we had discussions with him early on. He's actually had a graduate student make a presentation about sort of the impact of light pollution and nesting, I believe. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but yeah. So it's something that we try to point out to. We try to hit it on as many channels as we can. Yeah, at some point the message may get across. But interesting enough, when you pointed out the story of the puffins in Iceland, and when I was there, one of the things that I noticed was that there are all these greenhouses there, and they emit a yellow light. And so when you're looking off in the sky, you see the aurora, and then you see this yellow glow in the sky from all the greenhouses that are growing the plants. So it's a problem. And I think, that's also a problem in some of the more rural areas. I read an article I subscribe to a group that tracks aurora. And people are complaining about, I think I saw the aurora. This is yellow light. And other people point out, no, that's the greenhouse that you're seeing.
Right. Yeah. And I remember seeing that story. Poor lady. She really thought it was an aurora, and it was actually the purple light from a grow light. And over here in the East Coast, in East Coast U.S., at least in Northeast, you'll see marijuana is grown in greenhouses with this ultraviolet, like this purple glow. And the glow, again, a simple solution is curtains. There are solutions for these things. They exist. Right. They are made. They're sold out there.
Before we get too far, can we talk more about the puffins?
Yeah, let's talk about puffins.
I think we've overlooked one of the most amazing parts of this puffin story, which is, as a solution, people just throw the puffins over cliffs into the ocean. They just grab these little baby puffins and throw them into the ocean. And that's how we're solving this problem. It's amazing to me.
Well, it's kind of like, putting duct tape on a bumper, right?
I mean, just to have the courage to take a little chick and just toss it into the ocean off a cliff. Yep.
That's how they did it.
It's like tying into the puffins. I mean, I don't see puffins where I live, but going back to my state, Florida, where we're dealing with the turtle population, then we look at the lighting there specific to the site. And I didn't realize about the colors I did not know that. I thought maybe a possibility of what, like turtles, for example, we deal with, that might have less of an impact. But when you don't have that, where any light attracts, it just, how do you fix something like with the exception of shielding, like you mentioned? And I've got to come from the law enforcement side on this too. When we do change to turtle lights, again, looking at the temperature, that has a really big impact on what we call witness potential. So I've got Marine Patrol that's out on boats, and they receive descriptions of what to look for. But when they look out, say, okay, I'm looking for a green boat, red boat, I'm looking for an orange boat, they don't see it. They have no clue what they're looking at. And so that forces them for the additional work to maybe stop every boat because they can't tell the color and then hit it with a spotlight. Oh, that's not red. Okay, we can go. But it just, and again, saving the environment, I understand that, but the impact it has on policing is pretty large because it comes back to camera technology. Capturing that image, identifying it, the license plate, the tag. And sometimes they lose that because of that. And again, trying to balance both the environment and then public safety.
That's so on that color perception, oftentimes you hear a 4,000 Kelvin temperature. Is that the optimal for law enforcement?
That's what we look for, especially with camera technology and body cameras and what they're wearing now. They need that light, again, because you get into color buys, you get into articles of clothing. If I'm capturing that image and I'm sending it to other officers out there, here's what they're wearing. They're able to identify that with that temperature. You drop a little lower, below 3,000, then it becomes more difficult for them. But then in the same breath, again, the environment too. So law enforcement has to come up with some solutions as well. And it can't be isolated. It's got to be everybody coming together to come up with that. But 4,000 is what even the security industry looks for in many cases for their camera systems.
But that's, but the recommendation that we're putting out is 2700 Kelvin is the optimal temperature. Yeah, so the 4000, if I remember right, is quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a bit whiter.
Yeah, it's quite white. It's right up there, but then it gives you that background. It gives you the clothing. It gives you the facial recognition that you need. But then if it's on the waterfront and you can't do that because of, again, turtles for us, what's the balance for them too? Because a lot of the technology will highlight that face, for example, and identify the person. And the same with the officer's body cameras when they're working on something. It just impacts them. So what's the answer? And that's the discussion we're having now with IS and dark sky and the security industry and law enforcement. What's that optimal temperature that we can work with, especially in densely populated areas? It's different than in a rural area. So again, looking at those two.
It seems like the technology would lend itself to adjusting the electronics so that you can adapt to a lower color temperature. I think it may be an issue with economics at this point.
I think so. I think you're right with that. Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about the color temperature, I'm going to skip ahead here to our health news because this is one I'm curious about. There's only one real kind of health story this month, and it involves our January guest, Dr. Mario Mata. Evidently, color temperature is a serious point of contention for lighting engineers, probably because of what you're saying here, Art, specifically the Illuminating Engineering Society, IES, who appear to be distancing themselves from the 2016 American Medical Association's claim that street lighting contains blue light that causes adverse health effects. The article from Inside Lighting refers specifically to a Restoring Darkness podcast episode whereby Dr. Mata insinuate that some in the lighting community have harassed him. For you at home, you'll recall we had a rigorous discussion on artificial light impact on human health back in our January episodes with Dr. Mata. If you missed those, definitely want to check them out. Take a listen. Perhaps not surprisingly, this piece of Inside Lighting only brings attention to a 2022 article, which we discussed on the show at that time, that indicated roadway lighting may not impact salivary melatonin levels. Existing in the same space, however, are a drumbeat of studies that were left out of the article, which correlate artificial light to human health concerns, including diabetes and Alzheimer's disease, all of which, of course, have been discussed on the show as well. Specifically, I'll point you to our holiday potluck episode where guest John Barentine brought up the study that he found to be very important from PNAS. I think this, whatever the color should be, what about the human health aspect? How does that play into this calculation?
A lot of times it's not even considered when they just look at crime reduction and interacting with the community. And we said that in that omnipresence program in New York City where they focused that on public housing. They were way up on that scale of 4,000, 5,000 Kelvin lighting up the neighborhoods. So they're looking at that. If we're looking politically, they want to see crime reduction. That's what they want to see. Government wants to see crime reduction. And New York set that standard where they use that. And they dropped crime 36% using these bright white lights just flooding the side of the buildings. And so if I'm a politician, how do I argue that? Where, hey, this dropped crime 36%, but I'm not talking about your health. I'm not talking about the risk I put you under by using that type of light source. I just dropped crime 36%.
Also, I guess the best way to put it, there are a lot of people who receive the light, right? So law enforcement here would like to see it 4,000 brighter, whiter, daytime. Recipients of the light, however, in almost every survey, actually every survey that I've come across on this show, including the one I'm about to talk about right now, actually wants to have warmer lights. They want to have warmer lights in their neighborhoods. We've had a small handful of surveys and articles that have discussed this on the show. However, another one here, an addendum to the point, is it appears a study from looking at visitors' perceptions to Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming found that red lighting is a pretty unoffensive color despite not being perceived as bright. Researchers surveyed 573 people, obviously a biased group that's come into the park, so it's not necessarily in an urban environment or any real-world situation, but it's a park situation. An average age of 44 years old, and the individuals are 60% male. Overall, the red light outperformed white on its perceived impact to wildlife and visual comfort. Red outpaced the white on navigational comfort and still was slightly better, edging out the white when it came to a feeling of safety. Obviously, this is, like I said, a little more of a biased sample, right? But how do you balance that with what a neighborhood would want?
That is so difficult. Again, like and go back to what Spencer said earlier about the technology in the future to try to fix that. That would be the catch-all. That would take care of all of it. But if there's no crime occurring there, and then we go into grid patterns, traffic flow, pedestrian access, then I don't really see a need to change that lighting out. It comes back to public safety, and public health is part of public safety. So it's just looking at the full picture, education, talking to each other. I always come back to the New York study of what they did, that you lost quality of life. Everything's gone. You're going outdoors, walking your dog, gone. You can't do that anymore. But hey, we dropped crime 36%. Well, I'm not a happy person anymore because I can't interact with my neighbors in the evening hours in the patio because you're flooding with light. And just that social component is so infuriating, even for me. We could have done that, but kept the light on the ground. We could have dropped it down quite a bit. But again, it's the political part of it. Let's just flood it with light and we'll make it safe. Did it work? How can I argue with 36% reduction in crime? So it did work, but at what cost to the well-being of the neighborhood? So not taking their input. So that's the frustrating part of it too, trying to work with government.
Okay, we'll finish out the show with some less depressing, I guess, details. Well, this one comes to us from earth.com, and it's not necessarily about light pollution, but I liked it so much I wanted to include it in here because it showcases the impressive capacities of Mother Nature to blend in under a cover of moonlight. Barn owls may be perfectly engineered as predators. As nocturnal animals, the structure of their face helps funnel actual noises to their ears so they can hear what's going on around them. And then they also have white faces and a white underbelly, something you'd think would probably be problematic for a nocturnal predator. However, barn owls actually leverage bright moonlight to their advantage. The feathers of the bird reflect light that effectively reduces perceived contrast between its body and its nighttime sky. The barn owl, perched high in a tree, blends seamlessly into the night sky. That is a really cool story. I want to share that with everyone. Just to show you, we're talking about light and how it's all used, and an animal, a predator, utilizing light to its advantage in a low light situation. That's pretty good. Okay, we got one last piece here, and I'll wrap up the first show for this month in March. Do you guys sleep good? I'm just curious. How many hours is it good sleep? How many hours you sleep at night? Would you rate it like a 10, 5, 1? How would you rate it?
Who do you want to start with?
Let's start with you, Art.
I like at least 6 to 7 hours sleep. 7's good, 6 the minimum, but 7, the age now, I'm pretty good with 7.
And is it good quality? Are you getting good quality sleep right now?
No, I've got so many things that influence that, from looking at the phone to reading a tablet to the lights outside. I look at that. So there's it's not the best.
Jeff, how about you?
Well, actually, I sleep great nowadays, but when about 20 years ago, I really did not. And this is actually how I became a dark sky advocate, was because I couldn't sleep at night. And I was up all the time. And even though I didn't get to sleep, I'd wake up in the morning, I was very groggy. And I had to really examine what was in my environmental factors. And then I discovered circadian rhythms, melatonin, and basically that the lights around me were keeping me up at night. And it was that dramatic shift of learning how to adjust the lights in my house, turn off, change the lighting of the TV, set the settings of the computer. And it was those changes that have really made me passionate and understand what light pollution is. And that was my sort of entry into the subject. So nowadays, with all that control, I sleep great. Head on the pillow and I'm out. Good 6, 7 hours. I love it.
There we go. God bless you. Spencer, how about you?
I think my sleep is about average. I get about 5.5 to 6 hours a night. I'm a night owl, so I don't go to sleep until wee hours in the morning. Yeah, to 1:30, sometimes 2 o'clock. The minute I hit the pillow, I'm out within like 3 minutes.
Spencer, are you able to observe or do astrophotography from your spot in LA County?
Yeah, I do. I'm fortunate I live on a cul-de-sac with no streetlights. So my city has no streetlights, at least in my area. And I'm on a small private driveway, so I can have my telescope on wheels and just roll it out to the top of the driveway and start shooting away.
Oh, that's great. What kind of rig is it? What kind of scope?
I've got two. I've got 61 inch. I'm sorry, 61 inch.
61 inch. Wow.
Yeah, 61 millimeter. Yeah. Yeah. Millimeter Williams optical refractor I got an M5 mount, and that I love it. And I also have a 9.25 Schmidt Cassegrain that I hook up for galaxies. And it's not bad. With the light pollution filter, I get pretty decent results. I've been playing around with quad band filters, and they look okay. But I've got some friends in the club who live in really heavily light polluted areas, and they use narrowband, and they get some phenomenal pictures with narrowband.
I live in a Bortle, I guess 9 now. Probably changed over in the past year or so. But I can only use 1 or 2 bands. I can't go much beyond that. But you got to watch out, man, because I'll tell you what, we have a streetlight that just randomly appeared here by a neighbor who somehow had ties to some other part of the city. And it wasn't the usual streetlight. So they found a way to just plant up a streetlight. Strange things happen.
Well, BB guns around.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's good. I like that, sir. I like that.
We've joked about that. I can't say anything with Art here on the show, but yeah, and especially when you live in an urban area. Jeff, where do you live at? What area do you live?
I live in northern San Francisco, above North San Francisco, in the North Bay.
Okay, yeah. If you actually do live in an urban area, it's a little more difficult probably to sleep. The sleep industry appears to be a booming one aimed at younger adults. This is not the first time I've come across one of these stories, but this one was really good. It was specifically focused on the holidays, which, of course, Art, to your point, could have many different reasons, stress, a lot of different things going on. But however, news agency Tech Reviewer CNET found that adults will be willing to spend upwards of $78 a month. That's $900 a year to improve the quality of their sleep. And it doesn't stop there. Over half of the U.S. adults employ some type of coping mechanism to deal with sleep deprivation. I mean, I do for coffee, a lot of coffee. However, 21% of them take supplements like melatonin. Now, the focus of the survey was Q4 of 2024, which includes costly purchases like beds and mattresses that make up the bulk of that $900 annually number. However, apparently, of the sample size, only 23% of the people surveyed didn't have any sleep-related challenges. Just 23%. Supplements appear to be in a lead in the way of fixes, and I will note that at no point does the survey address the elephant in the room, that is both exterior light from light trespass from outside sources and interior light pollution from things like indicator lights, phones, air fresheners. For some reason, air fresheners have lights on them these days, but there's that. So consider yourself lucky, Jeff. You probably have the healthiest nights of any of us here.
You got to embrace the darkness, is what it is.
That's right. Right. Join the dark side. Okay.
What's irritating is that a lot of indicator lights are now blue.
Yes. Yep. And they're blue because they think it's blends in with the dark. Well, I think some of those, like the air freshener ones, we come across these at Airbnb. So we have to unplug 5 things just to make it a little dark in your place. Let's stop here. We'll pick up this conversation in 2 weeks. I'd like to thank my guests, crime prevention specialist and law enforcement veteran Art Hushen, Dark Sky Redditor Jeff Shmalz, and researcher and astronomy outreach participant and coordinator is Mr. Spencer Soohoo. As a reminder, if you heard anything you like on this show or heard anything wants to shoot over a comment or a question, feel free to either text us via the link in today's show notes via a podcast player or send over an email to bill@lightpollutionnews.com. You can find us online at lightpollutionnews.com and on the socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and more. Light Pollution News is a listener-supported show. Today's show was recorded on February 16th, 2025. I'm your host, Bill McGinney. Thank you for listening. Remember to only shine the light where it's needed.